Family cruelty led to my mental breakdown and hospitalization. Years later, successful and they regret ignoring me. Hello everyone. I debated posting this for a long time, but I think I need some outside perspective. I am Clara, 28 years old female. My family consists of my parents, Nora, 55F, and my father, 57M, and my older brother, Kevin, 30M. We always lived in a nice suburban house, went on seemingly okay family vacations, the whole 9 yards. To anyone looking in, we probably seemed perfectly fine, maybe even idyllic. But the reality inside those walls was vastly different, especially for me. Growing up, Kevin was the golden child. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He got straight A's, was captain of the soccer team, popular, everything they wanted in a son. I, on the other hand, was always less than. I wasn't a bad kid, not really. I got decent grades, mostly B's and C's. I had a small group of close friends. I was quiet and preferred reading and art over sports. But compared to Kevin's shining star, I was perpetually in the shadows, and my parents never let me forget it. The comparison started early. Why can't you be more like Kevin? Kevin finished his homework already. Why are you still dawdling? Kevin got an award at school. What did you do today, Clara? It wasn't just comparisons. It was active belittling. My interests were deemed silly or a waste of time. My art was just scribbling. My desire to maybe study literature or history in college was met with scorn. They wanted me to pursue something practical, something that would make them look good, like Kevin, who was planning on going into business. My father was often the more overtly critical one, making sharp comments about my weight, my grades, my choices. My mother, Nora, was more insidious. She played the concerned parent, but her worry always came with a backhanded compliment or a passive-aggressive jab. "Oh, Clara, that dress is nice, but does it perhaps make you look a bit larger?" Or, "I'm just worried you are not applying yourself, dear." Kevin never had this problem. It was a constant barrage of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy. Kevin, for his part, soaked up the praise and mostly ignored me, unless he needed something or wanted to join in on the teasing. He learned early on that siding with our parents against me earned him points. He would mock my drawings, tell me I was adopted because I was so different, or accidentally break things I cared about. When I cried or got upset, I was told I was too sensitive, that I needed to toughen up, that Kevin was just joking. No one ever defended me. I learned to internalize everything, to believe that maybe they were right. Maybe I was just inherently flawed. This went on through my entire childhood and teenage years. High school was particularly rough. While Kevin was homecoming king and getting accepted into prestigious universities, I was struggling with anxiety and plummeting self-esteem. I tried talking to my school counselor once, but I couldn't articulate the depth of the emotional abuse. It sounded petty when I tried to explain it. My parents compare me to my brother. They don't like my hobbies. How do you explain the crushing weight of never feeling good enough? The constant erosion of your self-worth by the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. I managed to get into a decent state university, choosing a major English literature that my parents openly disapproved of. They wanted me to go into nursing or accounting, something secure, something Kevin would approve of. They made it clear they thought I was making a huge mistake, setting myself up for failure. They offered minimal financial support, reminding me often that Kevin had earned scholarships, implying I hadn't worked hard enough. I took out loans and worked multiple part-time jobs throughout college to make ends meet, determined to prove them wrong, but mostly just trying to survive. College was a mixed bag. I loved my classes, I loved the freedom, but the emotional baggage I carried was heavy. I struggled to make deep connections, always afraid people would see the worthless person my family had convinced me I was. I had recurring bouts of depression and anxiety, often triggered by phone calls home or visits during holidays, which were always stressful events filled with criticism and comparisons. Kevin by then was working a high-paying job in finance, engaged to a woman my parents adored, hitting all the milestones they valued. I was still just Clara, the disappointing daughter, working at a coffee shop and barely scraping by while pursuing a useless degree. The breaking point came when I was 23. I had just graduated college, magna cum laude despite my parents' predictions of failure. I was proud of myself, for the first time in a long time. I had landed an internship at a small publishing house, unpaid, of course, but it felt like a real step. I went home for a family dinner, hoping, foolishly, that maybe my degree, my honors, would finally earn me a sliver of approval. The dinner started tense as always. Kevin was bragging about his latest promotion and his upcoming wedding plans. My parents hung on his every word. Then my father turned to me. "So, Clara, still planning on wasting your time with that book thing?" I heard Kevin say his friend's younger sister, you know, the one who went into marketing, just bought her own condo. 23, imagine that. When are you going to get a real job? I tried to explain about the internship, the potential opportunities, how much I love the work. My mother jumped in. "Oh honey, we just worry. Publishing is so competitive and well, you have never been the most assertive person. Maybe you should think about going back to school for something more practical. We just want you to be secure like Kevin." Kevin smirked. "Yeah, Clara. Face it. Some people are cut out for success and some people, well, they serve coffee," he laughed. My parents chuckled along. Something inside me just snapped. It wasn't one specific comment, but the accumulation of years, the utter lack of recognition, the casual cruelty, the way they laughed. It felt like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning. I remember vaguely pushing my chair back, muttering something about needing air, and stumbling out of the dining room. I made it to the guest room, my old childhood bedroom, and collapsed onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. But it wasn't just crying. It was a full-blown panic attack, morphing into something darker. All the negative thoughts, all the self-hatred my family had instilled in me, rushed in like a flood. They were right. I was worthless. I was a failure. I would never measure up. I would never be happy. The pain was immense, unbearable. I felt like I was drowning and honestly read it in that moment. I didn't want to be saved. The thoughts swirling in my head were terrifyingly dark. I just wanted everything to stop. I don't know how long I was in that state. Eventually, my mother knocked on the door, not with concern but with annoyance. "Clara, stop being dramatic and come back to the table. Our guests will be here soon for dessert." Her voice held that familiar edge of impatience. I couldn't respond. I couldn't move. I just lay there, consumed by despair. She must have opened the door because the next thing I knew, she was saying something sharp, probably telling me to get up. But then her tone changed. She must have seen the state I was in. I heard her call my father, then frantic whispers. I distantly registered them trying to talk to me, but their voices sounded far away, distorted. The next few hours are a blur. I remember paramedics, flashing lights, the sterile smell of a hospital. I was admitted to the psychiatric ward after being evaluated in the emergency room. Diagnosis: major depressive disorder and severe anxiety, triggered by acute emotional distress. The doctors said I had experienced a complete mental collapse. My parents' reaction at the hospital was illuminating. There was some initial shock, perhaps, but it quickly morphed into embarrassment and annoyance. They spoke in hushed tones to the doctors, more concerned about what the neighbors would think or how this reflected on them than about my actual well-being. I overheard my mother telling a nurse, "She has always been overly sensitive, prone to dramatics," as if my breakdown was a performance staged for their inconvenience. Kevin visited once. He stood awkwardly by the door, mumbled something about hoping I felt better soon, and made a quick escape. No apology, no remorse for his part in the dinner debacle. Just discomfort and a clear desire to distance himself. That hospital stay, as awful as it was, became a turning point. For the first time, I was physically removed from my family's toxic influence. I had doctors and therapists who listened, who validated my feelings, who told me that what I experienced wasn't normal or okay. They helped me understand that the problem wasn't me. It was the environment I grew up in. It was years of sustained emotional abuse. During those weeks in the hospital, I made a decision. I needed to cut them off, completely, for my own survival. When I was discharged, I didn't go back to their house. A friend from college, bless her soul, let me crash on her couch. I blocked my parents and Kevin's numbers. I blocked them on social media. I sent them one single, brief email explaining that I needed space for my mental health and would not be in contact for the foreseeable future. I didn't justify, argue, defend, explain. I just stated my boundary. The backlash was predictable, channeled through flying monkeys, relatives, family, friends, who contacted me, urging me to reconcile, telling me I was breaking my parents' hearts, that I was being selfish and ungrateful. How could I do this to them? "Nora is so worried about you. Your father is beside himself." It was incredibly difficult to hold firm. The guilt gnawed at me, but my therapist helped me stay strong. She reminded me that their worry and hurt were likely more about their loss of control and the disruption to their carefully constructed family image than genuine concern for me. The next few years were about healing and rebuilding. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. I continued with therapy religiously. I worked through the deep-seated trauma, the feelings of worthlessness. I learned to set boundaries, to advocate for myself, to practice self-compassion. It was slow, painful work with many setbacks. There were days I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by depression or anxiety. But I kept going. I also poured my energy into things that brought me joy and a sense of accomplishment. I left the unpaid internship. I couldn't afford it mentally or financially, and found a job doing administrative work. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave me stability. In my free time, I started writing. Not for anyone else, just for me. Short stories, poems, eventually the seedling of a novel. It was my escape, my therapy, my way of processing the world and my experiences. Slowly, things started to shift. I moved into my own small apartment. I made new friends who valued me for who I was. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, but eventually met a wonderful man, Jose, 30M, who is kind, supportive, and celebrates my successes instead of belittling them. He knows about my family situation and has been an incredible source of strength. And the writing? Well, something unexpected happened. On a whim, encouraged by Jose and my therapist, I submitted a short story I had polished to a literary magazine. To my absolute shock, they accepted it. Seeing my name in print, my words out in the world, was an indescribable feeling. It ignited a spark. I started writing more seriously, honing my craft, submitting more work. More acceptances followed. Then I finished that novel I had started years ago. Getting an agent was tough, rejection after rejection, but I persevered. My therapist often said my resilience was my superpower, forged in the fires of my upbringing. Eventually, I found an agent who loved my book. And then the unbelievable happened. A major publishing house offered me a contract. A real one, with a significant advance. My debut novel came out last year. And it became a success. Like a real, unexpected New York Times bestseller kind of success. It hit a nerve, resonated with people. The themes, perhaps drawn from my own experiences of finding light in darkness, seemed to connect. Suddenly, I was doing interviews, attending literary festivals, getting recognized. My life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined back when I was sobbing in that hospital bed. I had financial security, professional recognition, a loving partner, genuine friends, and most importantly, a sense of self-worth that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. And that's when my family reappeared. It started subtly. A card from my mother for my birthday, the first contact in almost 5 years. Just a generic card signed "Love, Mom." No mention of the past, no apology. I didn't respond. Then a few weeks later, an email from my father. Subject, "Thinking of you." The content was brief, awkward, mentioning he had seen an article about my book and was impressed. Again, no acknowledgement of why we weren't speaking. I ignored it. Then the attempts escalated. Phone calls from unknown numbers that I let go to voicemail messages from my mother, her voice trembling, saying she missed me, asking why I was doing this to her. Emails from Kevin, bizarrely cheerful, suggesting we grab coffee and catch up, like we were old buddies. He even mentioned how proud he was, how he always knew I had it in me, a blatant rewriting of history that made my blood boil. The latest development happened last week. My mother showed up unannounced at a book signing event in my city. I was in the middle of talking to readers when I saw her standing at the back of the line, clutching a copy of my novel. My heart leaped into my throat. Seeing her face after all this time brought back a flood of conflicting emotions, anger, hurt, and deep down, that old, ingrained longing for maternal approval I thought I had conquered. When she got to the front of the line, she put the book down for me to sign. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Clara," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "we need to talk. I miss you so much. Your father isn't well, his health has been declining. He asks about you constantly. We made mistakes, I know that now. Please, can we just talk?" I froze. Part of me, the wounded child part, wanted to crumble to let her back in. But the stronger, healed part of me, the one I had fought so hard to build, recognized the manipulation. The timing was too convenient. They ignored me when I was struggling, when I was hospitalized, when I was rebuilding my life from scratch. Now that I am successful, now that I have something they can brag about, or perhaps need something from, they suddenly want to reconcile. The mention of my father's health felt like emotional blackmail. I managed to keep my composure. I signed her book quickly, just my name, no personal message. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "Mom, this isn't the time or place. I appreciate you coming, but my boundaries haven't changed. I need you to respect that." I then signaled for the next person in line. She looked stunned, then hurt, and quickly walked away. Since then, the calls and emails have intensified. Guilt trips about my father's health, pleas for forgiveness, reminders that they are my family. Kevin even sent a long, rambling email detailing his own recent hardships. Apparently, his high-flying career hit a snag, and his perfect engagement fell apart, and hinted that maybe I could help him out now that I was doing so well. The audacity is breathtaking. So here I am, Reddit. I've built a life for myself despite them, a life I love. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I'm successful. But their reappearance has stirred up old wounds and created new anxieties. Part of me feels guilty, especially about my father's health, wondering if I am being too harsh, too unforgiving. But another part, the part that remembers the hospital bed and the years of therapy, screams that letting them back in, even a little, would be detrimental to my hard-won peace and mental health. They haven't truly acknowledged the depth of the harm they caused, and their sudden interest feels opportunistic and self-serving. Am I the asshole for keeping my distance, for protecting myself, even if it means potentially alienating my family permanently, especially with my father's health concerns in the picture? Am I wrong to suspect their motives after years of cruelty followed by years of silence, only broken when I became successful? Update 1. Wow, Reddit, I honestly did not expect this post to get so much attention. My phone has been buzzing nonstop, and I have spent hours reading through your comments. Thank you truly for the overwhelming support, the validation, and the thoughtful advice. It means more than I can say to feel so seen and understood, especially when my own family made me feel invisible for so long. So many of you shared similar experiences, and while it is heartbreaking to know others have gone through this, it is also incredibly validating. Reading your comments has really solidified my resolve. A lot of you pointed out the suspicious timing of my family's reappearance and their lack of genuine accountability, and you are absolutely right. The focus on my success, Kevin's sudden financial troubles, and the convenient mention of my father's health, it all points towards motives that are not centered on genuine remorse or rebuilding a healthy relationship. As many of you said, true apologies involve acknowledging the specific harm caused, demonstrating changed behavior over time, and respecting boundaries, none of which my family has done. Their attempts feel like love bombing and manipulation, tactics they used in the past, just repackaged. Regarding my father's health, thank you for helping me untangle the guilt. Many commenters wisely pointed out that his health is not my responsibility, and using it as leverage is a classic manipulation tactic. It is sad that he is unwell, but his choices and my mother's choices led to our estrangement. My well-being cannot be sacrificed on the altar of their belated, conditional regret. I cannot set myself on fire to keep them warm, as one commenter eloquently put it. I need to protect the peace I fought so hard to achieve. So, what has happened since I posted? Well, the messages continued for a bit after the book signing incident. My mother sent several tearful voicemails, and Kevin sent another email, this time more demanding, asking about financial help more directly. Jose has been amazing, helping me screen calls and emails, reminding me of my strength. Based on your advice and my own feelings, I decided to take a firmer step. I had my lawyer draft a cease and desist letter. It felt extreme but necessary. The letter formally requested that my parents and Kevin stop all forms of contact immediately: emails, calls, showing up at events, or my home. It stated clearly that any further attempts at contact would be considered harassment. It was sent via certified mail last week. Since the letter was delivered, there has been silence. Blessed, wonderful silence. I do not know if it will last, but for now it feels like a weight has been lifted. It was a difficult step, and part of me still feels that societal guilt about cutting off family, but the relief I feel confirms it was the right decision for me. I also took the advice of many commenters and doubled down on my support system. I had an extra session with my therapist to process the emotions brought up by my mother's appearance and the subsequent contact attempts. I have been leaning on Jose and my close friends, who continue to be wonderfully supportive. Someone asked if Kevin's ex-fiancée ever saw the family's true colors. I actually have no idea. They broke up sometime after I went no contact, according to the bits and pieces I heard through the grapevine before blocking everyone, but I never knew the details. Given Kevin's personality, learned at the feet of our parents, I would not be surprised if his behavior played a role. As for the future, I know this might not be the absolute end of it. They might try to find other ways to contact me, especially if their situations become more desperate. But I feel better equipped to handle it now. I have legal recourse, strong boundaries, and most importantly, I have myself healed, strong, and unwilling to let their toxicity poison my life again. My success isn't about revenge in the sense of wanting them to suffer. It is about proving to myself that I was never the worthless person they tried to make me believe I was. Living well and peacefully is the best outcome I could ask for. Thank you again, Reddit. Your collective wisdom and support have been invaluable. I feel less alone and more confident in my path forward. So, reflecting on it all, maybe the final question isn't AITAH, because your responses have overwhelmingly said in TA, not the asshole. Maybe the question is, how do I continue to navigate the lingering guilt and societal pressure while staying true to my need for self-preservation? But I think with your help I'm already finding the answer to that. Keep living my life, keep enforcing boundaries, and keep prioritizing my peace. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.